Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. And again, thank you for the snafu on the link sharing. I'm glad you're all able to find it. Thank you for bearing with us as we go through this. So as you know, this is day 4 of the emergency response program we're throwing for Minnesota small businesses. Today, we are going to be discussing Minnesota resources for our startups and small businesses. Before we dive into the program, I just want to give a quick bit of context. So questions during today's webinar, there will be a Q&A box that's available. You can see it on the bottom of the window if you pull it up. We will be answering questions on a rolling basis as appropriate, stepping in throughout the presentation, and we'll also save a bunch for the end too if we have additional time for Q&A. Any unanswered questions will be sent to the speakers and they can answer them after the webinar. And please do, if you have any questions, send emails to me, ben@generator.com, during the webinar with any other questions. Unfortunately, due to the number of people on today's webinar, we unfortunately won't be able to troubleshoot technology issues on an ongoing basis. But as a silver lining, we are recording each of these webinars so that we can share them on our emergency response program website under our resources page. And I'll follow up after this presentation with a link to this so you can watch it afterwards if for some reason there's difficulty with audio or you get kicked out of the meeting. So with that, welcome to our speakers, Neela Mollgaard and Josh Shoffner. Neela is Executive Director of Launch Minnesota, and Josh is a Metro Regional Business Development Manager at Minnesota DED. Also on is Jeff Nelson, and I apologize, Jeff, I didn't have a headshot for you to throw on here, but if you'd like to give a quick intro to yourself before the three of you dive into your presentation, I'll let you all take it from here to share your screen and your slides.
Thank you. Well, to start off, thank you to the Generator for developing these webinars, which are so important, and also for all of your work across Minnesota supporting our startup community. I'm Neela Mollgaard. I'll be kicking off the webinar today. Happy to share a little bit about DEED, the Department of Employment and Economic Development. It's the statewide economic development agency. And then, as Ben had just shared, you'll also have the pleasure of speaking with my colleagues, John and Jeff. So I will share my screen now. And does everyone see that screen? Right?
Yes, it looks good.
I love it when technology works. So before we dive into all of the resources, I'd like to quickly highlight who we are and what we do. It is the job of government to do things the market isn't incentivized to do. And then we need to get out of the way so our businesses and entrepreneurs and workers can create wealth and opportunity for the state. Here's how we are organized at DEED. In economic development, that's where we all are located. We support and grow businesses and communities through our grants, our loans, consultations, programs, and services. It includes areas like broadband, development, and the International Trade Office. This team has worked tirelessly over the last few weeks, answering tens of thousands of phone calls, working 24/7 to try to implement some of the loans that John will be walking you through shortly. The workforce development ensures businesses have the talent they need to be competitive and workers have the skills they need. And they've brought all this in just a few weeks, much of it virtually now for clients throughout the state. Workforce services range from programs that help people that are laid off and unable to work or due to employment issues, which you've heard a lot about in the news. And I just want to applaud colleagues in unemployment insurance. They were the first in the nation to begin approving the new top-off payments under the CARES Act. In the last few weeks, they have received over 120,000 more calls than they did in all of 2019. They are open 6 days a week for 14 hours a day. They are working tirelessly. Our comms and research helps ensure that you get the information you need, and operations obviously helps everything run smoothly. And all these people and departments help achieve these strategic objectives. I just want to take a moment and applaud the efforts of our colleagues at DEED, our business community, and our citizens. Everyone is doing their part, stepping up to tackle COVID-19. We learn daily of more businesses and startups addressing the needs of our community with the development of supplies and diagnostics and treatments. You need to check out the Businesses Doing Good on the DEED website under the COVID section. We have business stories ranging from 3D printing face shields to distilleries doing hand sanitizer to Medtronics sharing their specs for their portable ventilator. It's incredible. And us, the citizens, they're doing their part. We're staying home and it's working. I now have the pleasure of introducing John with our community development area. John, take it over.
Hey, good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to join the webinar today, and I really appreciate the team at Generator making this available and giving us an opportunity to reach a lot of people with some different programs that have been created to hopefully help everybody weather through this as challenging, unprecedented times as best as possible. And our area, as Neela mentioned, DEED's a big organization that covers lots of different things, everything from unemployment insurance to workforce to trying to recruit an international business to the business and development area. And I would like to mention that we're certainly optimistic that in the hopefully not too distant future, we'll be through this and everybody's efforts will be rewarded by flattening that curve, and we'll get back to some sense of normalcy. And so I did want to kind of give just a brief overview of what our main function is throughout the year on the business development team. As the state's lead economic development agency, we have business development managers in each region of the state that specializes in all of the different opportunities and partners within those various regions. And we focus on working with companies of all sizes and community partners, and basically trying to help businesses to grow and expand that are here in Minnesota, as well as to market Minnesota around the country and around the world, and telling everybody about the great workforce here and all the many reasons to do business in Minnesota as we try to recruit new employment creators to the state. Our primary focus is about geography, again, with each one of us focusing on a region of the state. There's two of us to do the metro area. And then secondarily, we have an industry focus. I focus on the foreign trade zone, logistics, medical devices, and I have a colleague that focuses on data centers, technology, and we have somebody on bioindustrial, and somebody on advanced manufacturing. So a lot of different areas that we cover. And we do have a shovel-ready certification program so that when companies are looking to expand, we've got sites that are ready to go in inventory. One of the other tools that we have, recognizing that economic development is a team sport and it's a partnership, is we've created the Minnesota Marketing Partnership, which consists of the state, a lot of the cities, the counties, and some private sector members that come together to basically collaborate on how to best market the state, both within Minnesota and around the country and around the world, so that again, people know how great a place this is to do business and to live and raise a family. And then we have our Minnesota Business First Stop. So any business that has any issues with any state agencies, whether that's DEED, Department of Revenue, MPCA, this is a team that can come together and basically provide one-stop shop for that company to meet with either all of the agencies or the relevant agencies as need be, to try to work through that problem and make it as easy as possible for you to grow and expand and thrive here in Minnesota. And with that, we'll get into some of the tools that have been created specifically to help try to address some of the needs that business has to weather through the COVID-19 pandemic. And the first one we'll talk about is the Minnesota Small Business Emergency Loans. And I heard somebody describe it the other day, and I thought it was actually a pretty good analogy of it. Is I think we're all trying to sort of build the plane while we're flying the plane here, because this really did come on pretty suddenly, and I think is certainly a lot more substantial than was originally anticipated. And so we're trying to listen to businesses, listen to the communities, and react to what we're hearing back as far as problems that are out there, and trying to come up with programs to help to alleviate those those challenges as best as possible. First one I'll dive into is the Minnesota Small Business Emergency Loans. And those were really created to address the businesses that were impacted by the Executive Order 2004 and 2008, which mandated those businesses close to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And this would be businesses that are things like restaurants, cafes, coffee houses, bars, theaters, gymnasiums, businesses that bring a lot of people together and could really accelerate the spread of the COVID-19. So recognizing that those businesses didn't really have a choice, they had to close for the greater good of the community. We recognize that they still have bills to pay and they still have obligations. So the Minnesota Small Business Emergency Loans was created, and this can provide loans of anywhere from $2,500 to $35,000. The loans have a 0% interest rate, 5-year term, payments are deferred for 6 months, and the loans may be partially forgivable. And this is based on if the business continues to be operational and is in roughly the same size a year from now that they are today, 50% of that loan can be forgiven. And these loans can cover a variety of things: working capital, rent, payroll, mortgage payments, various obligations that the businesses still have coming in a time of reduced or no revenues. So, and the state set aside $30 million for these loans. The applications don't come in deed; they go in through one of the approved lenders, and to date, I think there's 21 approved lenders all around the state that are actively taking applications. So, as a business, you would basically make application to one of those lenders. You'll see the website there at the bottom of the page, and if you go to that website, it'll give you a copy of the preliminary application, and that's basically determine eligibility, and then you would submit that through your choice of the 21 lenders. And it's important to keep in mind that these are all nonprofit lenders around the state. Some do have a specific mission focus, like one is Women Ventures, but they've all agreed to basically work with all comers. So even if you're not like within the specific target of that particular nonprofit, you are able to go to them and request consideration for one of these loans. So that's up and running. I know we do have quite a few applications that have came in to date. And once those applications come into those lenders, they'll go through them and they'll make a recommendation to deed as far as ultimate approval. And then once they're signed off on by the commissioner, they get funded. So that's up and running and in place. And we are hearing that some of the lenders are probably getting close to capacity. So we would suggest touching base, before you just submit the application to make sure they still have capacity to accept your application. But I know there's some interest in trying to see if there can be additional funding for that, but that's not we don't know for sure if that'll be a possibility or not. But we have heard that that's an interest of a lot of people. And getting on to the next program is the Minnesota Small Business Loan Guarantee Program. Again, we did hear from a lot of businesses that felt like they weren't necessarily covered specifically by the executive order, but they were also having to close down or having to impacts on their revenues, which was hurting their ability to pay their various ongoing expenses. So the next program that was created was the Minnesota Small Business Loan Guarantee Program, and that was funded with $10 million. One of the big differences in this one and the other one is this one is open to all businesses. You can't have more than 250 employees, and there are some businesses that are excluded if your primary line of revenue is gambling or businesses focus on adult activities. Those things are excluded, but it's open to any other business with less than 250 employees. And the various banks around the state have basically submitted their application. There's quite a few that have been approved all around the state. And again, if you go to that website, you can see all of them. And what we would suggest is looking at, if you already have a relationship with one, definitely go to the one you have your relationship with. If not, look at the one that's in your community or closest to you. And the way this program would work is you would make application directly to that bank, and they would apply their internal underwriting criteria, and the state would basically provide an 80% loan guarantee. That maxes out at $200,000. So you get a $250,000 loan from the bank. 80% of that is guaranteed by the state. So it would certainly be our hope that the lenders are stretching a little bit and making these loans available to businesses that need the funding. And this can also include things like machinery and equipment, working capital, maintenance and repair, wide variety of things that are covered. And we would hope that that this would leverage 20 to 25 million by private banks as they added funds to these loans and made those available to businesses. So another tool that we hope is going to be helpful to companies. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time today on the EIDL loans or the PPP loans, because you did hear from our colleagues with the SBTDC on Monday, who I know, and the SBA, I think, had participated in on that one, to share additional details on those two loans. And we would strongly recommend that everybody apply for the SBA loans. That's something that there's some very attractive terms. And there's a lot of availability in those, and I know there's conversation around trying to increase the amounts in that as well too. So that's something that we recommend everybody take a look at. And again, kind of getting back to some of our more traditional programs, we do still have our Minnesota Investment Fund and the Job Creation Fund that are out there for businesses that are growing and expanding in the state. The Minnesota Investment Fund is more restricted than the other two. It's basically for companies that could be here, could be elsewhere, and serve our regional national market. And that's a tool that we have to try to attract that investment to Minnesota and to work with existing Minnesota companies to grow their business here. But we did want to make you aware of it, again, recognizing that there's everybody on the call today, from sole proprietors all the way up to even larger businesses. So for businesses that are looking to grow and expand, we welcome the opportunity to work with you. And this is not just during the pandemic, but all throughout the year, our business development team is there to work with you and help you to navigate different tools and programs that we have, or our local regional partners may have around the state, to help you make that business case to grow and expand here in Minnesota. And the way the Minnesota Investment Fund works is the state provides the money to the local government, who in turn makes a loan to the business. And these can be low interest and or forgivable loans. For machinery and equipment, they can go out as long as 10 years. So it really helps to, and we would look at the competitiveness of the project, the number of jobs to be created, the investment, and then we run that through our models to come up with a non-binding offer, and then there's an application associated with it if the business decides to move forward. The second one that I'll dive into a little bit is the Job Creation Fund, and that's a performance-based program. You've got to be creating at least 10 new jobs and investing at least $500,000 in real property investment. If you're in greater Minnesota, those two numbers have 5 new jobs, $250,000. And we would again look at the real property investment, the number of jobs you're creating over a 3 to 5 year period, and greater Minnesota can go out to 7 years. And there's a different incentive per job, 1, 2, or 3,000 per job per year, up to $500,000. And then there's a real property investment rebate of 5% in the metro area and 7.5% in greater Minnesota, which would also tap out at $500,000. And again, that's another tool that we have to make sure that, we're staying competitive and helping existing companies to grow and continue to attract new companies into the state as well. And another program I want to highlight that a lot of businesses have been able to take advantage of is the Minnesota Job Skills Partnership. And this program's been around 30 years, I think. And it's basically a program that the state has. We strongly believe in continuing to invest in the workforce, now more than ever, I think, as we come out of this pandemic and companies are reshoring things, changing around supply chains, we recognize there's probably going to be an even greater need to upskill employees to handle the new lines of business and new opportunities. So we think this will be another tool to make sure you're aware of. And basically, the company can partner with any accredited college or university in the state, and that higher education institution will work with the company to develop a training program. And that we see that used in a lot of cases for things like welders, machinists, any skilled labor like that. Some companies also use it for leadership training, training their supervisors, managers, customer service people. It can be used for lots of different things. And that's something, again, if somebody has a specific interest in that, we'd be happy to dive into greater detail with that and how it may be applicable to your situation and training your existing workforce and or new employees as your business hopefully gets back on a growth trajectory. And so that was created to maintain high quality jobs in Minnesota, make sure that one of the things that we always hear when we're traveling around to different trade shows and events and talking to companies and site selectors is that highly skilled Minnesota workforce and ambitious workforce is one of our biggest assets. So that's known really all over the country and has been a tremendous tool to try to bring additional skilled opportunities to Minnesota. And that does require a match from the company, but the match can be an in-kind match. It can be the wages you pay the employees, things like that. So, but again, I don't spend a lot of time on that, but just did want to make you aware of it so that you know that's another tool that we have. And I'm going to hit on just a little bit on the unemployment insurance. That's another area of our agency. And but we did want to we know there's a lot of people that are impacted by job loss in light of all the things going on. I think the latest number I heard nationally was 16 million. So we definitely want to make sure that people are able to access those benefits when needed. And we continue to encourage people to apply online at the uimn.org. That's the quickest way to get in. My understanding is we're taking about 6,000 calls a day through the operators that are working the phones over there and trying to help people out, and processing about 20,000 claims a day. So that's they're really working almost around the clock. They're adding people and trying to do all they can to answer questions that are coming in. But best way to get in is the uimn.org, and they have processed, I think, about 90% of all the applications that have came in. Some of the ones that have additional questions or take a little further review. And as Neela shared, it was announced yesterday that we were, I think, the first state in the nation to implement the new CARES Act topping off program, which is adding the additional $600 a week. And I think the number I saw thrown out yesterday was that that was made available to 192,135 applications, totaling over $115 million. So that money is getting out there and getting in people's hands to help people meet obligations and hopefully weather the storm here. We did want to also make sure that you're aware of an additional program that has been popular called the Shared Work Program. And that's a tool where companies that are trying to hold on to their staff, again, recognizing that revenues may be down, demand may be down, but they want to keep that staff throughout this thing in anticipation of being ready to go once we're through this and back in action again. And the way that program works is it allows employers to divide available hours among a group of employees. The employees all then receive partial unemployment insurance benefits while working the reduced hours. And this is good for the employer and good for the employee, and that it keeps everybody on the payroll, still receiving your benefits, and it enables the employer to quickly get back in action once this is all said and done. So lots of tools that are out there, and again, I would encourage you to definitely reach out. My contact information is on the next screen, so you got my email, phone number, and we're happy to have conversations with anybody that has questions that maybe don't get covered today. And if it's not something that our team can answer, we can generally find out who has an answer. We'll make sure that we get you an answer back or get you connected to the right person. There's other things that are out there for companies that might be looking to expand their export activities. We have STEP grants that can fund part of the cost of translation, travel when that's back up and running again to go meet potential clients. there's another new program that was just rolled out recently called the Peacetime Emergency Child Care Grants, which does provide some grant funding to child care agencies around the state. And those can be for-profit and nonprofit institutions. So lots of resources that are out there. And if you have a chance to poke around our website, I think you'll find a lot of information on there about our financing tools, workforce training tools, and a lot of interesting statistics. On the labor analytics section, there's a database on there that you can look and see unemployment filings by county around the state if you want to kind of get an idea of how the different areas of the state are being impacted by these layoffs. And so again, we're all in this together, and we want to make sure that we're here as a resource for everybody to help you out as best we can, and hopefully all get through this together and emerge even stronger on the other end. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Neela, and I'll be sticking around for any questions anybody may have today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Now I get to touch a little bit about Launch Minnesota. As all of you know, the cities and states that are creating attractive environments for entrepreneurs are really outpacing those that don't. And in each of those locations, government does play a role. And we are very fortunate to live here in Minnesota. Leaders in our government, Commissioner Grove, the governor, legislators, allocated funds and a directive to form a statewide collaborative effort to accelerate startups and amplify Minnesota as a leader in innovation. This will happen by these three things, and I'll walk through these quickly. Increase access to capital. We have $3.2 million in innovation grants. These grants are targeted at the most promising, innovative, scalable technology businesses. There's $35,000, up to $35,000 for a business operations grant, $7,500 for housing and childcare, and up to $50,000 for phase 2 SBIR STTR. We are also encouraging any new technologies that is addressing COVID-19 to apply, and those applications will be fast-tracked. Really proud to announce that we've already granted over $1 million in our first 2 rounds, and a third round will be announced here shortly. We also are working with our private sector to double investments, and already have matched 1-to-1, if not more than that, for every dollar that we grant out as a state. And the third part of that is our angel tax credit. We have $10 million allocated for 2021, and more details will come with Jeff Nelson shortly. We also want to develop the entrepreneurial talent by establishing educational opportunities statewide, focus on the lean startup methodology, training entrepreneurs on how to start and scale their business ideas, which includes building a network of mentors, experts from around the state to participate. And by building a collaborative culture, establishing a network of academic partners, government, business, and community partners to support entrepreneurs at every stage of that journey. And really, for the first time in our history, facilitating statewide data collection on entrepreneurial demographics, needs, and opportunities. Now, I'm really excited to announce the Launch Minnesota Network. This was just recently announced a few weeks ago, so it's just getting off the ground. But this is a broad mix of expertise from corner to corner of our state, including co-working spaces, accelerators, support organizations, SBDC offices, and academic partners. And they are all interested in helping entrepreneurs succeed. The goal of this network is to improve coordination, increase capacity across the state's innovation ecosystem to maximize impact. Now, each of these organizations stand ready to help with your business needs, and they are connecting entrepreneurs to programming, technical assistance, mentorship, access to capital, networking opportunities. So we've seen the Northwest, the Southeast, the Southwest. Here's the Twin Cities hub, West Central hub, and our statewide partner is the University of Minnesota. And here are some current April competitions and courses for you to see about. So working together, we will definitely advance Minnesota's innovators and make our innovation economy a national leader. Really excited to have these partners, and looking forward to seeing what they're going to do, but they stand ready to help all of you. There's more information also on launchminnesota.org. You can look right there for the Launch Minnesota Network and all of their websites. I'm now going to hand it off to Jeff Nelson, who is going to dive into some other opportunities through DEED. Jeff?
Neela, Jeff, and John, before Jeff takes over, we do have a couple of questions here. I was wondering if we could pop in and ask just before we head into this last piece of the presentation.
Sure.
Okay, so the first one is if you could differentiate between eligibility for for-profit and non-for-profit organizations or entities through these programs.
Yeah, there's I'll go through the state programs. The IDO and the PPP are both open to for-profit and nonprofits. The Minnesota Small Business Loan Guarantee Program and the Emergency Loan Guarantee Programs, looking at those, the Small Business Loan Guarantee Program is open to, again, the small businesses named in the executive order, but it's not available to nonprofits. The Small Business Emergency Loan Guarantee Program, that is also open to an additional category of small businesses, anybody with less than 250 employees, but that one does not cover nonprofits either. And so the best source, I think, at this time for the nonprofits is going to be the SBA EIDL loans and the PPP loans.
Great, thank you. And then the next one, before we move on, as a startup founder, I'll just read this one verbatim. As a startup founder who left a full-time paying job on March 31st to focus on my new company, am I eligible for unemployment knowing that I'm not going to receive payroll now? And the ability to get investors will likely be delayed due to the COVID crisis. Once investments are secured, I would take payroll, and that's the question there.
Well, what we would encourage is for somebody that thinks they might be eligible to put in, it's a pretty quick application, put it in there, then that way you're in the system. Because one of the, I know one of the things that there's a lot of conversation around with the, especially with the CARES Act that went through, is trying to get money in the hands of the different independent contractors, sole proprietorships. And I know there's a lot of conversation around startup companies and making sure they're getting what they need to be funded. So I would encourage making the application, and they'll respond to that. But I'm a little cautious about making and giving advice around that today, just because each one of those situations is so specific. So that's probably something you'd want to go to uimn.org and put in an application, and they'll let you know if you're eligible.
Got it. Great. Thank you so much. And I'll kick it back to you.
All right, Jeff Nelson, you're up. Jeff?
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Now we can, yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to use the microphone and obviously it wasn't working. So again, I'll repeat. I'm going to talk about 3 different programs: the Angel Tax Credit Program, the Emerging Entrepreneurs Program, and the Reservists and Veterans Business Loan Program. All of these are for startup businesses. Let me start with the Angel Tax Credit Program. What it does is it provides incentives for investors to make equity investments in new startup high-tech businesses. It does that in the form of a tax credit to the investors. So on a very simple basis, if a business is qualified to participate in the program, and we'll talk about qualifying businesses in just a second, that business, if you are an investor and invest, let's say $100,000 into that business, you receive a 25% tax credit for your investment. This makes it far easier for startup businesses, for entrepreneurs to go out to investors and seek investment, because those investors then are getting an immediate return on their investment, and therefore their risk is far lower than it would be otherwise. It's a little funny to be talking about this program at this moment. The legislature, when they met in 2019, funded it for 2019 and for 2021, and for whatever reason didn't fund it for 2020. So the program isn't around for this year, but we will be accepting applications from businesses and investors to participate in the program starting in November this year. To qualify to be in the program for a business, you need to be headquartered in Minnesota, and at least half of your employees and half your payroll need to be in Minnesota. In addition, you need to have fewer than 25 employees, and all your employees need to receive compensation of at least 175% of the poverty level for a family of 4. That amount changes every year. There is, however, no requirement that there be any employees. In fact, most of the companies are truly startups, and it's just the entrepreneur. There are no employees yet. Again, as a startup, it can't have been in operation for more than 20 years. There's an exception there that if it's a business that is producing something that requires FDA approval, then it can be in operation for 20 years, because we know how long all that takes. And final eligibility requirement here is that it can't have already raised more than $4 million. In addition, there's a $1 million in angel tax credit cap per business. Businesses apply online, and there's a certification fee, which is $150. So let's move on and talk about investors. So investors need to be a natural person, and people ask me, well, what does that mean? And I like to explain it in a very sort of humorous fashion. I say, if you pinch someone hard enough and they bleed, they are a natural person. So we're talking about people, humans. We're not talking about legal entities such as a C Corp or an S Corp or anything. It has to be a person. In addition, that person needs to be an accredited investor, and that is in accordance with Securities Regulation D, meaning they have to have a certain minimum income, certain minimum asset level, that type of thing. So it's generally people that if they were to lose their investment, they're still not going to be hurting. There is an exception for that, and that's that if the business is participating in a limited offering pursuant to Minnesota securities statutes or a score offering, then non-accredited investors can also participate. Investors that are not eligible for the credit include officers, principals, 20% owners of the company being invested in, as well as any of their family members. Overall, there is a minimum qualifying investment of $10,000. And again, for every rule, there's an exception. So if the investment's being made in a targeted business, that means a business that is owned and operated by a minority person, a veteran, or a woman, or if the business is located in greater Minnesota, meaning outside the 7-county metro area, then that minimum investment amount is $7,500. Investors also need to certify to participate in the program, and they do that online, and the certification fee for an investor is $350. Let's move on and talk about funds. So funds are sort of the third part of this piece. You can either be a business, an investor, or a fund. Funds can make investments, and they have a few qualifications to be qualified as a fund. There must be at least 3 qualifying investors. Those investors, those 3 at least, need to be natural persons. The fund can have other members that are not eligible to participate in the program. So a fund could be made up of 3 individuals plus an LLC. That fund could be certified, but only the 3 individuals would qualify for the credit. The same restrictions apply for fund members as they do to individual investors, meaning that if you're an officer, a principal, or a substantial owner of the company, you're not eligible for the credit. A fund must be organized as a pass-through entity, such as an S Corp or an LLC or a partnership. What's interesting, however, is that the credit does not flow through the entity, does not flow through the fund. It goes directly to the fund members. A fund must make a minimum qualifying investment of at least $30,000. And for a fund to get certified, again, which it can do online, the fee is $1,000. Next screen, Neela. So overall, it's a fairly simple process, and most of it is done online, and more of it will be moving online when we get to 2021. So step one is to apply for certification. Again, simple online application form, and you can even pay your certification fee online. Step two is to apply for a tax credit allocation. We have to allocate out the credits because we only have so many dollars in credits per year. So we have to keep track of the money going out the door, in essence. That is a joint application submitted by both the business and the investor. Basically, the investor is saying, I'm going to invest $100,000 in this business, and therefore reserve me $25,000 in credits. So when we approve the credit allocation, we are reserving those credits for that investment. Then the investment is made, and it's important that the investment be made after the credit allocation is approved, because the law there is very clear. It can only be, the credits only go to investments after the allocation has been approved. So make the investment, you submit to us the proof of investment, and once we approve it, then those credits go to the investor. Final step in the whole process is that all the participants in the program have to file an annual report with us. Investors and funds file for 3 years. What they basically are doing is simply attesting that they still hold the investment, because there is a 3-year holding requirement. Annual reports are done online. And businesses, they have a 5-year reporting period. They are required to maintain their headquarters in Minnesota and have at least half of their employees in payroll in Minnesota. If they move out of state, then those businesses have to pay back the credits that were granted to their investors. Next screen, Neela. So let me just tell you a little bit about what happened in 2019. We had 124 businesses that got certified. 72 received investments. That's an important thing to point out, that just because we certify a business doesn't mean it's necessarily a business that one should invest in. It simply means that it meets the statutory requirements for being part of the program. So investors still need to do their own due diligence. We had 401 investors that got certified, and the vast majority of them made investments. 20 funds were certified and 18 made investments. Those 18 funds represented 227 investors. We had a total of almost $40 million invested, and we allocated 10 million credits. When we allocate the credits, then of course the investment happens afterwards. It turned out at the end of the year, only 9.7 million of those credits were used. Only so many of the investments that were planned actually took place. That extra 0.3 million rolls forward to the next program year. So when we start in 2021, we'll have 10.3 million in credits that we can allocate. Interesting factoid, 40% of the investors and 40% of the investment dollars came from people outside of Minnesota. And 32% of the number of businesses that were invested in were targeted businesses. Again, the women, minority, and greater Minnesota businesses. But that, however, only represented 14% of the investment dollars. So targeted businesses, again, small Minnesota businesses. Excuse me. I am now switching topics. The Emerging Entrepreneur Loan Program, totally separate from the Angel Tax Credit Program. This program is geared directly to businesses that are owned by minorities, low-income persons, women, veterans, persons with disabilities, or businesses located in greater Minnesota. This is a much smaller program. The loan amounts are from $5,000 to $50,000, and the businesses must obtain a match of at least 1-to-1 with other financing. Much like the program that John was talking about that the state's doing for emergency loans, these loans come through various lenders throughout the state that we have certified. Most of them are nonprofit lenders, and that list is pretty much in conjunction with the other program. The lenders here set the terms for those loans. They set the interest rate, what kind of collateral is required, and the length of the loan. However, they are subject to some maximums. They can't charge more than 4% plus prime for an interest rate, and their fees on any of the loans are capped at 1%. The loans can be used for a great variety of things: startup expenses, working capital, equipment, inventory, etc. And the business types vary considerably also. Anything from manufacturing to information technology to even retail. But for retail, there are some special exceptions that it has to be small retail. It can only be a retail business with under 5 employees, and it has to be fairly new, less than 2 years in operation. And sorry, we don't fund any liquor, tobacco, gambling, or adult-oriented businesses. Next screen. So the final program I just want to talk about again briefly is targeted toward reservists and veterans. This program was started shortly after 9/11 and was really targeted at veterans that were serving during 9/11 that were coming back and wanted to start their own business. These are loans that we at Deed originate. The loans vary in amount from $5,000 to $20,000. I worked on this program for a little bit, and very few applied for fewer than $20,000. It has relatively sweet terms. There's no interest. You take out the loan, you have no repayments for the first 18 months, and then you repay the loan over the following 36 months. So a veteran has to be one that has been honorably discharged, has to have been on active duty for at least 181 days. And the business that they're starting up has to be owned and operated by them, needs to have fewer than 20 employees, under $1 million in revenue. That's usually not a problem, nor 2.5 million in gross revenue if it's a technical service or professional service. Most of these businesses that we work with are really just starting out, so those dollar limitations really never come into play. And here are just some of the contact information for some of those programs that I talked about. I work with the Angel Tax Credit Program, and I worked with Neela on the Launch Minnesota. You can see that Drew Lindorfer works with the Emerging Entrepreneur Fund, and Chinwei Negus works with the Reservist and Veteran Business Loan Program. And Neela, I'll let you conclude here and then start taking questions.
Thank you, Jeff and John. And that concludes what we had to share today, but we would all be welcome to any questions that people have.
So it looks like we took care of most of the ongoing ones submitted through the Q&A portion during the presentation. If anyone has any others, please feel free to submit them through using the Q&A function. One was asking if on the last presentation you could please go back to the last slide and show the contact details one more time.
Yes.
Ben, was it that slide or the slide before with the different programs?
I believe this slide with the contact information. Oh wait, actually they're asking back one more.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah. So we have a longer question here, and I'm just going to read it out so everyone can hear it. This is from the Minnesota Montessori Network. The organizations I'm supporting during the COVID crisis are essential services that are trying to stay open to serve. They're facing a dire situation that many are at during this time. Can you please share what DEED or other Minnesota state agencies are considering to support this challenge and help these organizations remain viable? These small businesses, nonprofits in my case, even as essential services, are barely maintaining financially I believe she means they mean stability here. Already as revenue is down or gone due to COVID-19. They are now struggling to maintain staff because the federal $600 per week payment, in addition to MNUI, is significant financial gain for these employees. No, this is a relatively complex question that has a lot of facets to it. To the Minnesota Montessori Network, I'm going to tag this and follow up in an email with some more detailed information on this. Any other questions?
I did see a question from Susan Langer about some of the resources specific to startups. That is being developed and will be out shortly, but on the DEED website under COVID-19 resources, there's a detailed list with many links, but we are working on tailoring it specifically to startups and small businesses. And that will be sent out when that's completed.
Well, you know, one other thing I would mention too is a lot of the cities have programs as well. I know Minneapolis, St. Paul, Brooklyn Park, I think, is working on something, Minnetonka. And so there has been some talk about maybe trying to add a section to the DEED site where we would compile those things. Of course, they're changing constantly. So it's kind of challenging to gather that information, but that is something that we're hearing quite a bit of interest in, is if there was a central spot that people could go to find out what may be available at their local city or county or some of the regional nonprofits. So that's something we're taking a look at and trying to see if we can pull something together around that.
I would add to that, John, though, with the Launch Minnesota Network, there's regional hubs, and there's many organizations, EVA offices, SBDC offices, and others that could also provide that information. So that link is on our Launch Minnesota website, and many organizations are prepared to answer those local resource questions.
Okay, well, with that, thank you all for your attendance here. We'll follow up with additional information after this in a group email to everyone who attended with additional resources. To the presenters, thank you so much for your time today, taking it out to walk us through this. I know this is extremely valuable just for me in terms of learning what's available, and I can't even say how valuable this probably was for all the small business owners in attendance. Again, we have more presentations coming out this week, so stay tuned. Friday at noon, we'll have another one. I'll send out the schedule again as a reminder. And also, we have made one-on-one office hours available with our staff to help you navigate on your questions that you do have. So please do refer to the onboarding email that has a link to sign up for those and take advantage of the time.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for all the work of Generator.
Of course. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. You too.